Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Welcome to our 112th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding the book of Exodus, Parshas Vaera. Parshas Vaera is chock full of speaking about different plagues that happened to Pharaoh, hardened his heart. A lot of interesting things going on in the parsha. One thing I wanted to focus on here, it says, book of Exodus chapter 6 verse 14, these were the heads of their fathers' houses: sons of Reuven, firstborn of Yisrael, Hanoch and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These are the families of Reuven. So we go through a list of who the heads of the fathers' houses were. So you might say, okay, very nice, right? Gives a little bit of a genealogy. Who cares? What is it? How does it really affect us? How does it affect us in any way? So says Mori Rabbi, Arav Agon Moshe Shlita, should be well. He says, he brings down in Chochmah V'das, his book on Chumash, he says like this: you could explain that it's told, it's told the story of someone who's a Talmid Chacham, someone who is a rabbinic scholar. He has a discussion, he's sort of like jarring with a friend of his. Right, his friend, what does his friend tell him? He says, you're a great Talmid Chacham. You are a great rabbinic scholar. But me, I have Yichus. I have genealogy. Right, I have a pedigree. So answers the Talmid Chacham, says the rabbinic scholar, you know what the difference is between you and me? He says the difference is, the way you're going, your pedigree doesn't mean anything. Right? You're not holding by Torah's and mitzvahs too much. So your pedigree is going to end. Right? But with me, where does the pedigree start? I'm not relying on my forefathers. My pedigree starts with me. I'm the one who builds myself. Right? In Torah and spirituality. So this is what it means. Rabbi points out, these are the houses, right? The heads of the houses of our forefathers. That each one is fitting to have their own pedigree, because they're starting out themselves, right? They're starting out that they themselves are, rabbinic scholars, spiritually inclined, and all that. So therefore, it starts from them. That's where it comes from. So Rabbi points out, this is the obligation every Jew, right? Every single Jew, even though we have Yichus. Every Jew has pedigree, right? Where does the pedigree come from? It comes from the forefathers. It comes from Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Nonetheless, we still have to be Rosh Beis Avos. We still have to be the house of our fathers, right? The heads of the house of our fathers. That we should have our own pedigree, not relying on the pedigree of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Really, our pedigree should start with us. Right, and and people will see where this pedigree, comes from. So this is an important thing. There are a few other points that we will, we'll make along the way, but nonetheless, there is, it's a very fundamental. There's a very fundamental point in here. That is, that a pedigree, right, if you come from a great, most people have great rabbinic figures in their, in the past, right, generations past. Nonetheless, even if a person comes from a tremendous pedigree, right, a spiritual pedigree, at the end of the day, guess what? Doesn't matter, because pedigree, as my Rebbe's mother would say, having Yichus, having this pedigree, just like adding another zero. Right? It doesn't mean anything. You have to, we have to live up. We're going to try and live up to this pedigree, no question. But we make our own pedigree, right? Our pedigree starts with us. So therefore, regardless of where we came from, regardless of how strong, that Yichus, that pedigree may be, at the end of the day, so what? Maybe it means I have more obligation, right, in this world. And therefore, I have to strive and be the best that I can be, right? Everyone has to strive for that in order to reach, their potential. So in this case, person gets upstairs after 120 years, God's going to ask them, did they keep Torah? Were they honest in business? Like all these different things. And we're going to have to answer. But one answer that's not going to be accepted, there'll probably be many answers that won't be accepted. One answer won't be accepted is, look at my pedigree. Look where I come from. Right? So what's God going to say? Who cares what your pedigree is? Right? The question is, what are you now? What did you become? Regardless of that pedigree. Right? And that's, and that is the disagreement over here between the Talmud Chacham, the rabbinic scholar, and this person who's claiming to have this great pedigree. Because even if he has a great pedigree, that pedigree is going to be lost. 1 generation, 2 generations. That pedigree is not going to mean anything. If the person themselves makes their own pedigree. In other words, they make themselves into a rabbinic scholar, then, that is something that's worthwhile. So each person has to look at themselves like, I am the pedigree, right? It's starting with me. The question is, what's it going to look like? Is it going to look like something where it's going to disappear, God forbid? Right? It's going to be it's going to go into an abyss. Probably going to sink into this abyss. Or is it something that you can build from? Right? The famous story, I think I mentioned before, previous videos, there's a famous story with the Chaim. Someone came to him and says, my pedigree, my Yichus goes all the way back to Rashi. Right? This was a secular Jew, telling the Chaim. Chaim looks at him, nods. He says, yeah, but that's where your Yichus ends. That's where your pedigree ends. My pedigree starts with me. He says, oh, hubris. Look, he's so conceited. No, he's not conceited. But he understands if he's striving to be the best that he can be spiritually, in Torah, in mitzvahs, that means he can say that my pedigree is going to start with me. I'm going to build spiritually as much as I can, in a way that I'm going to be the head of that household. Right? I'm going to be the Rosh Bezav, the head of the house of our forefathers. Right? Our forefathers had Yichus. They had a pedigree. Everybody has a pedigree. Where does the pedigree come from? Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. But you see, even though in Shemona Esrei, in the silent meditation, where a Jew will say, blessed are you, God, the God of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, that's our pedigree. That's how we butter up God. We can't come on our own coattails. We have to be on the coattails of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Nonetheless, even if we're on their coattails and we're able to pray, the question is what we do. What our actions are. Do we have our own pedigree? It's good to have a pedigree from Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Not enough. Right? Pedigree has to start with us. Now, that's not being conceited. Every person has to know what their place is, and where they're headed and what direction they're going, etc. It's all about reaching potential. It's all about what am I doing in this world? Either I'm growing or I'm not growing. There's nothing, there's nothing in between. Not like that, I'm happy being mediocre. We're not striving for that. We want to be the best spiritually that we can be. It's a test. There are many tests. Right? There are many tests a person, will go through. But each person themselves can say, I am my own pedigree. And if I'm my own pedigree, then everything starts with me. Right? Did I learn enough? Did I review? Did I make myself an example? For the family. In spiritual terms. Not thinking about how much money a person has, how many fancy cars are there. It's not about money. It's not about physicality. Right? It's about spirituality. So Rabbi here continues and says, this is how we have to educate our children, that they should learn the greatness of their forefathers. And that, is what the blessing of Yaakov is. Because it says, he calls upon them in my name and the name of my forefathers. Right? When he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. Right? He praises his forefathers. So it's not like in the academic world where people think the further you go back, further generations go back, we're similar to a monkey because of evolution. The way we look at things is the older the person, the closer he's a link in a chain to giving the Torah Mount Sinai. Not like a monkey. Right? So previous generations are to be respected, are to be honored. Right? It's brought down that in today's generation, today's generation cannot argue with the previous generation. Right? The rabbis of this generation cannot argue with previous generations unless they find a dissenting opinion in that generation. So let's say in the time of the Vilna Gaon, 250 years ago, if some rabbi wanted to disagree with one of the laws that the Vilna Gaon brought down, can only disagree if someone lived in that time of the Vilna Gaon, disagreed with the Vilna Gaon. We don't have a right to go back in time and say, oh, this is his opinion, this is the Vilna Gaon's opinion, this is Rav Shach's opinion, why my opinion? Right? That's heresy. Because we have to respect previous generations. Previous generations are much greater than us. Much, much greater. Right? We're not even ants compared to them. We're less. We're not even the dust under their feet. We're less. We say, but look how much technology we have. Look at all these things that we have. Has it made us better? Has it made us produce more rabbinic scholars? Or has it made us totally lazy? Or has it made us, we don't want to work so hard? I can just go to Rabbi Dr. Google. I don't have to think. I don't have to look things up. Just go to him. He'll have the answer. Right? But we have to know what to answer. Right? Someone asks a question. You have to know, like this. Right? Now you can see. You have to be able to answer straight away. That comes with a lot of learning. Comes with clarity. Right? We have to have clarity in our learning as well. So then my Rabbi points out, as we mentioned, that the non-Jewish world thinks that every generation, in science is so much greater that really we evolved, right? Went from a hydra to paramecium, or paramecium to a hydra to a butterfly to this, so eventually we get to man, right? So basically we come from animals according to them, right? We come from monkeys according to them. And that's all over, academia. Otherwise, if you don't say that, you don't believe in evolution, even though they've never proven evolution to be true. They've never found the missing link, right? The most recent thing, probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago, is they found a jawbone and a set of teeth. That's about the closest thing they found. Nonetheless, what happens if you don't believe in evolution? What is the alternative? The alternative to evolution is the creationists, the Torah, the story of Genesis, and how the world came into being. It's either one way or the other. So if evolution hasn't been proven, and it certainly hasn't been proven in science, right? I don't think there's any question about that. Nonetheless, why, if it hasn't been proven, why do they hold on to it so strongly? Why will they look at you like you're an ape if you don't believe in it? You're so backwards. The world's 1 billion years old and all these different things. Why don't you believe in it? It's obvious. Answer, because what else would you believe in if you don't believe in that? The only other thing you'll ever believe in is the story of creation. And that, how could you be an academic? How could you be a scientist and believe in the stories of the Bible? How could you believe in that? Right? That God created the world or whatever. So in the secular world, not so surprising. They're going to hold on to it until they die. For the sole reason that they can't admit that the Torah is true. They can't admit that the story of creation is true. And, if you look at the theory of evolution, in general, forget the fact that it hasn't been proven, right? They haven't found a missing link. Let's keep in mind, when animals are created, right? Even if you say during the day there were billions of years, whatever the case is, how long would it take for a monkey to become a human? With degeneration every second, right? With a mutation every second. Now, the difference between a monkey and a human in DNA is 1%. If it's 1%, and even if you had a billion years, a trillion years, whatever it is, between those days, and you had a mutation every second, you would not be able to turn a monkey into a human. Even though the DNA is just 1% difference. That's one thing. So to say you went from a paramecium to a hydra to a butterfly to this, a little bit far-fetched. But they'll still hold on to it, because the alternative is worse. Now, so this gets to what we said before. The fact that if you look at previous generations, we're living in an unbelievable, technological age. Everything's going very quick. All these technological advances, etc. At the end of the day, let's take somebody like the Rambam. Right? The Rambam lived almost 1,000 years ago. The Rambam was a famous doctor. Right? The Rambam was a doctor of the Sultan of Egypt. Now the Rambam's job was to take care of the Sultan and his family, etc. So he sort of got stuck living in Egypt. But the Rambam understood, as medieval as he may have been, living in that time, he understood what herbs did what to heal people. Whatever they were going through, whatever sickness that they had. He understood, take this herb, mix it with this, mix it with that. Presto, you'll be okay. If you would ask a regular doctor, I'm not talking about holistic doctors or, etc. You ask a regular doctor. Go in for a checkup, this bothers you, that bothers you, you have certain issues, whatever it is, and he says take this medication. Now what's the worst thing a doctor will ever hear? Most times. They're going to hear, why does that work? Why do I have to take this? Now, a doctor's been through a lot of schooling, right? He's had a lot of practical experience. He doesn't want to be questioned. Totally doesn't want to be questioned. Now, he could tell you, I don't know, it just works. This is what people take. And this is, why it works? That's a whole different thing. Listen, there are doctors no more than others, right? Well, the medicinal properties of plants and how they work and what they do and all that. I'm not saying they don't exist, but you're talking about, almost like a prehistoric time, with no information out there. The Rambam figured all this out, right? They say, oh, well, the Rambam was more intelligent than a lot of people. And not just he's more intelligent. It's a tremendous disadvantage. He wrote an unbelievable work in his book, the Yad Chazaka, the Mishnah Torah. He wrote the laws of the holidays and laws of damages and laws of marriage, divorce, all these different things. And he wrote a whole book on Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the moon. How the Jewish people, how do we get the holidays? How do we know which month is what? If it's 29 days, it's 30 days. It was based on people saw the moon, and then they would come, they'd ask them where they saw the moon and what direction was it going in and this and that. And they would bring him to Basin. They would come to Basin and give testimony, right to the Sanhedrin, or wherever Basin they found. And then the month would be either full or it wouldn't be. And then we know when the holidays are, etc. So that's how the moon was sanctified. So the Rambam is chapters, very, very detailed chapters, about the moon and astronomy and different things that, is before his time. In many ways, before he had all the great, astronomers or whatever. But he was able to figure out things in an unbelievable way, even though he lived 900 years ago. Take somebody like Hillel. Hillel organized the calendar. Right? He organized the Jewish calendar. The difference between the Jewish calendar and the solar calendar, right, is about 11 days. So the holidays, most people know. If you don't know, you'll know now. The holidays have to fall out at the right time. Passover has to be in the spring. Sukkot has to be in the fall. If you're a Muslim, you also go according to the lunar calendar. But Ramadan can happen anytime. It can happen in winter, spring, summer, fall. They don't make the adjustment. Temple's being destroyed. Comes along Hillel. What does Hillel do? He devises a calendar system. He devises a calendar system for all generations. That every 19 years, there are going to be 7 times that is going to be an extra month. You're going to need an extra month to compensate the days that you are missing. Now, this is pretty incredible because we rely on Hillel's calculations. And through his calculations, we have the calendar that we have today. Now, that happened more than 1,000 years ago. Right? That happened more like 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Now, who was Hillel? Hillel was unbelievably righteous, unbelievably humble, as well. But keep in mind, Hillel and many rabbis of his generation had the ability to bring people back from the dead. They were on that spiritual level. No, we're not talking about spiritual cooties, we're not talking about sorcery. They had the ability to bring people back from the dead. Problem was, the generation wasn't worthy. So since the generation wasn't worthy, it didn't happen. Wasn't able to do it. So when people talk about the rabbis of the Talmud, it's only their opinion, this, that, you have no idea who you're talking about. Right? These people were like malachim. They were like angels in so many ways. They're medieval, they're this, that. You have no idea. Right? But the people today, and over the years in academia, make this fundamental mistake. And I think that the further back we go, the closer we are to being a chimpanzee. Okay? I guess that's their opinion. They're going to hold to it because they can't hold according to creation. Right? That would go against everything, they believe in. That you have to read Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History in Time. See what his conclusion is at the end, because he seems to prove the creation is right. But he says, you can't believe it. Can't believe what I wrote, over there. Let's see what he wrote. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, the further we go back, the greater people were, even by non-Jews, right? Today, we have what we call Yeridas Adoris. We have a going down of generations. Even though you tell me, today's generation, we have so much knowledge, so much technology, more than we've ever seen, and it's just growing by leaps and bounds. Being more technologically advanced doesn't mean we know how to think better. Right? Someone who's steeped in all kinds of immorality and other things, doesn't matter how, even if they have a genius IQ. To sit, to think, to hash things out, it's a hard thing. Not everyone's cut out for it. But this is what we do. Right? Anybody who sits and learns, that's what you do. You go through Talmudic texts. This one says like this one says like that. What are they arguing about? You got Rashi, Tosfos, you got other commentators. How is it brought down according to Jewish law today? There's a lot to learn. But you have to think. You can't learn Torah like you're reading a newspaper. It's not logical. It has its logic. But you have to buy into the logic. You have to take the logic for what it is. Because a lot of it, to us, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why in this case be pure but not impure? And there are a lot of things that just don't add up according to our own understanding. But you have to remember, even in the laws of damages, we have to remember the Torah is the Word of God. If the Torah is the Word of God, then at the end of the day, these other things, even if they make sense to us, right, let's say like the laws of damages, it's still the law of God. It's still God's law, God's Word. It's hard, right? It's definitely hard. But we shouldn't make the mistake and think the previous generations weren't worth anything. They were medieval. They were, subhuman, so to speak. Not the case. Right? They were greater than we can even imagine. Right? Much greater. Even rabbis of 100 years ago. Right? The rabbis of this generation can't touch them. 50 years ago, can't touch them. It's different knowledge. It's a different base. But we think everything that's old is bad. Person can't work as hard, can't do things. Put them out the pasture. Like the Greeks. Parents getting old, took them up to the top of the mountain, said, Mom, Dad, it's been great. That's it. Moved on. Left them there. So, technological advances in such an unbelievable way, does that help produce more rabbinic scholars today? Probably not. Right? It helps in certain ways. Right? It helps looking up things, other things. It's not the same as taking the book yourself, going through, learning, trying to dissect what it means, what it's a reference to, how does it work, what are the ramifications. There's a lot goes into it. You have to break, sometimes things are extremely complicated. You could have, numerous issues in all of them. Multiple levels here. So, a person has to think. You gotta take it step by step. Some things are more complicated, some things less complicated. Right? But at the end of the day, you gotta take it in stride. You can't read it like a newspaper. You gotta think. What is it telling me? Why is it telling me this? What's the connection? What we said before or after? Right? If we're learning well, we should be able to come up with most of the questions that the commentaries ask. We got to think. And that's what learning is. It's learning how to think. Learning how to dissect. Learning how to put our minds in the minds of the rabbis. What were they thinking? And it's hard. A lot of times it's hard. Because there'll be cases there you say like, it sounds like an idiot. Why is he saying such a thing? Doesn't make any sense. So, in this rabbi's eyes, got to make sense out of it. We got to figure it out. We got to see why this, that, and the other thing, and try and make sense. Because they don't give examples for nothing. They don't make statements for nothing. It's our job. It's our job to try and understand it. And if we have difficulty understanding it, it doesn't mean what the other person said is stupid. Certainly not the case at all. We have to think. We have to use our brains. The old story, 1% think, 3% think they think, and 95% would rather, or 96% would rather die than think. People don't want to think today. Everything's instantaneous. Give me the answer now. You want to dissect it. You want to delve into it. This, that. Forget it. Think. Thinking's hard. Most people don't use more than 3% of their brain. Thinking is hard. When a person learns and they're learning well, their head hurts. It's hard. Even if it makes sense to us, even if it makes logical sense, it's still hard because we have to remember it's God's word. And if it's God's word, don't think I should be able to understand everything. At every level. It's complicated. So back to our original discussion. The rabbinic scholar versus the pedigree. Rabbinic scholar will always win out. Why? Because he has something. He learned, and he continues to learn, and he wants to pass that down. Now, his children will have to take the bull by the horns and also learn. Right? Torah is not an inheritance. So they also have to learn. But if they take that on and they grow spiritually, right, they can pass some of these ideas down to their kids. And then to their kids. Right? That has nothing to do with pedigree. Each person has their own acquisition of Torah. Now, their own acquisition of Torah means it has to be within the realm of Torah. There are 70 faces of the Torah, that's true. But you can't go outside the boundaries. Right? Once you start going outside the boundaries, that's not Torah anymore. That is Torah made in my own mind. And Torah made in my own mind disappears. Just look at Reform and Conservative. They'll disappear. Right? They are disappearing off the face of the map. That being said, there has to be learning with integrity. With honesty. With giving every fiber of my insides and thinking and going through it. There's a famous story with the Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Yishaya Karolitz, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may his name be blessed, one of the Torah giants of the last generation here in the land of Israel. He was never physically strong. Right? There were times that he was just so physically spent from thinking and thinking and thinking. Sometimes he fell asleep before he could even make it to his bed. He just gave up his physical strength, to give everything he had into thinking and to learning and dissecting and all that. And that gave him all kinds of other knowledge. God gave him a gift. Gave him all kinds of secular knowledge as well without him having opened a science book or anything else. If a person's really in tune, and they absorb what they're supposed to absorb in Torah, they should be able to figure out other things also. Right? It helps them in other things. But see, scholarship doesn't come overnight. Scholarship takes a lot of work. A lot of effort. Especially, a person has to realize what they're doing even if they're not making a lot of money. Right? Because there's nothing more important, certainly in the ultra-Orthodox community, there's nothing more important than learning. Jewish scholarship, right? Torah, halacha, Talmud, that's it. That is the most important thing. Making money you have to, because you have to support your family. Right? But there's nothing more important than learning Torah. That's why almost 60% of the rabbinical court judges here in Israel that were chosen came from the ultra-Orthodox camp. It wasn't a question of discrimination. The question was qualified. Right? So if 58% come from your community, 15 out of 22, that's significant. Does it mean other communities, let's say the modern Orthodox, religious Zionist communities, don't have rabbinic scholars? No, it doesn't mean that. Do they have as many as in the ultra-Orthodox community? It doesn't seem like it. Because their emphasis is not on learning. It's not like they don't, it's not like they don't praise learning, but it's not the end-to-end all things. For ultra-Orthodox Jews, it's everything. And if God forbid a boy doesn't make it in the system and doesn't learn well, that's it. It's finished. That is the base of where someone's greatness is. How much do they know? How do they learn? Who their rabbi is. That's another important thing. Who do they get guidance from? At the end of the day, at the end of the day, we have to stand on our own 2 feet. But you see, you have to work, you have to sweat. That's what it's all about. It doesn't come easy. You can have people like Rabbi Chaim Wasserman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, Hashem Yikam Damo, that God should avenge his blood. Rabbi Chaim Wasserman said about himself, he became great in his own way. In his own way. Torah giant, second to none. Famous student of the Chaim. He claimed about himself he had average intelligence. So how could someone with average intelligence be as great as he was? Very simple. He worked, and he worked, and he worked. If you tell me he's a genius, he's got a photographic memory, he's got a tremendous advantage. No question about it. And even if he's a genius and, etc., doesn't mean he's going to get to where he needs to get to. He just has an advantage. But someone who's not a genius, got to work that much harder. Got to strive, got to work, got to uncover, got to dig. Trying to find reasons, trying to understand. It's hard. And you certainly have to review, because if you don't review, it's not worth anything. So pedigree helps, To a certain extent, if a person's born in that type of family, and it's passed down generation to generation, you have rabbinic scholars after rabbinic scholars, etc. It's easy to get in that mode. Doesn't mean you always fit in. Right? You have some people that don't necessarily fit in, but let's say most of them do. That's unbelievable. So pedigree helps to a certain extent. Certainly not everything. And if a person's a secular Jew, they say, oh, my pedigree goes back to Rashi. My pedigree goes back to this. Well, who cares? Right? There's no rabbinic scholar here. The pedigree ends. Right? It dies a slow death or quick death, depending on it. A pedigree can certainly help in different ways. In connection, if no one's lost that connection. So you have people in the family you can go to, you can speak to, you can get strength from. That's a huge thing. You have generations of people going in the same direction. Bali Tshuva, converts, right, returnees to Judaism and converts, they don't have that. Because the family's not religious. Sometimes the families come back, sometimes they don't. Right, a lot of times they don't. They have no connection to that. So here, they have to be the rabbinic scholar. Here, they have to take the bull, they have to take the bull from the horns. And they have to man up and take on the Yichus. They themselves are the pedigree. Because make no mistake, nobody's going to hand it to them on a platter. Right? You work hard, you show you're serious, then there's hope. But it's not going to be a cakewalk. Got to learn the language. Right? Yeah, you have to fight for it. For some people it's just too hard. There's so many changes that they have to make. And learning a lot is hard. It takes training. It takes hours and hours and hours. Right? And we don't see the benefit necessarily. A person may gain more knowledge. The question is, does it change them? Does it make them into a different person? That's what Torah is. Torah is supposed to teach us to do what God wants. A person can have tremendous secular knowledge, tremendous Torah knowledge. Is it going to make him a moral individual? It should. But we also have an evil inclination. So as much as a person learns, you have to put that inside yourself. Right? That's what I'm always fond of saying. It's not how much you learn Torah. It's how much Torah you put into yourself. That's a mouthful. Because that's true. A person has a tremendous amount of knowledge, but their character traits are awful. Then who cares how much Torah they learn? It's irrelevant. My language, the character traits are like spit, so the Torah they learn isn't worth anything. The whole purpose, someone learns Torah. They stand in line, they're nice, they're courteous to others. The person will say, thank God his Rabbi taught him Torah, thank God his father taught him Torah. What if he cheats, and he connives, and he uses excuses, and he looks like an Orthodox Jew? It's a desecration of God's name, no question about it. Totally wrong. So that being the case, the question is, do we envelop what the Torah says? Now you're going to tell me, who's perfect? Who's perfect? Nobody. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. Doesn't matter if we make mistakes. The question is, do we pick ourselves up and grow from them? And gain? Try and want to change. There's tremendous intellectual stimulation that a person can get from any number of subjects, of subjects in Torah. Intellectual stimulation, not enough. It's all about change. It's all about putting what I learn into action. If a person learns and they don't change, doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. It means they don't change. They're not interested in keeping Torah, this, that, and the other thing. It's not Torah. Torah is supposed to change a person. It's supposed to have an influence. So if you're learning it like mathematics, okay, it's like mathematics. Do you get the merit for Torah? Do you get something? It's not going to be the merit of Torah, though. You'll be like Ramosha Snyder, Zeichel Tzadik Livracha, my Rebbe's Rebbe, in London used to say, don't be a frummer student. Don't be a ultra-Orthodox student. Plenty of students out there in university. Right? Learning whatever they're learning. Don't learn like them. Don't learn mathematics for the sake of mathematics. Right? Or, sorry, don't learn Torah like mathematics. It's not another subject. Even though kids go to school, they have all kinds of subjects, they have a course in, let's say, Jewish history, and Chumash, and Talmud, it's just a subject. Torah's not a subject. Torah is life. Torah is all-encompassing. There's nothing that when a person wakes up, and before they go to sleep, there's nothing that the Torah doesn't deal with. Either esoterically or halachically. Right? It comes to Jewish law. There's nothing that it doesn't deal with. So, we have to take the message and not worry how much I'm learning and gaining knowledge. Am I changing? Am I making it part of my life? Now, for a Jew, it's not all or nothing. A person, can start out doing certain things and gradually grow into it. Convert doesn't have that option because they rejected the Torah. So therefore, they have to keep everything. Nonetheless, it's a process. In the process, you take step by step. You make building blocks. You learn a little bit here, a little bit there, try and catch up, whatever. But the more you learn and the more you review, it's going to be building blocks. And those building blocks are going to take you to a whole different level. Before, you were just trying to understand what the word said. Now, when you understand a lot more, why is one commentary not saying like the other? It's a different question. Much different question. There are multiple levels, right? Infinite levels, of learning, what a person can gain. But it cannot be that they're gaining only for intellectual stimulation, right? That is bad. That's not even Torah anymore. That's mental gymnastics. Mental gymnastics is akin to spiritual death. We're not interested in mental gymnastics. We want the real deal. The real deal is Torah going to change me or it's not? And if I'm not out to be changed, and I'm not out to, having an impact on my life spiritually, then what's the point of learning? Right? They say, the Talmud says that, if a person learns not for the sake of heaven, it'll bring you to the sake of heaven. Okay, that's not the ideal. That's totally not the ideal. Can it happen? Can Torah change a person the more they learn? Sure. Even if you're learning it for ulterior motives, 100%. Has that power. At the same time, is that the way I want to come to it? Absolutely not. If it happens, you're learning for that reason, okay. So, is that what God wants? It's not what He wants. He wants you to learn it and to do. It's not about Jewish philosophy. It's about action. Right? We can philosophize all we want. How many people have told me, if I really understood this to the letter of the law, I would do it, if it made sense to me. Not true. Because if it made sense 100% to you, you still find a reason why you don't have to keep it. Just an excuse. So it's not about philosophy. Because there are plenty of things that the Torah says we don't understand. You know what? God says, I don't really care. Shut up and eat the matzah. That's what you got to do. God doesn't care. Does it mean we should do things robotically? Absolutely not. That's even worse. Because then you're just doing things by rote. God doesn't want that either. He wants He wants Torah to be renewed on a daily basis. Like you're created anew every day. Everything's fresh. Can't take things for granted. What happened yesterday, can't take for granted today. Go through different things. That's a huge thing. Because day in and day out, a person gets burnt out. A person gets burnt out because you forget what your purpose is. And when you forget what your purpose is, then you're just doing things by rote, and it's very hard to break out of that. Right? Because once we get entrenched in bad habits, it goes. It's part of you. To uproot your nature, very, very difficult. Almost impossible. So we have to strive. The Mesilas Yesharim says in the path of the just, the Ramchal tells us that the worst thing a person can do is be lazy. We have to be zoris. We have to be excited. We have to be steadfast in doing mitzvahs. If you're lazy, it's not going to hit you all at once. It's It's going to hit you step by step. Kind of like injecting poison. A little bit here, a little bit there. Step by step by step. And then it's going to be part of you. It's going to be part of your nature. It's going to be just about impossible to uproot it. So, we have to do the mitzvahs with the fire. We have to be excited. There are a lot of things we have to do to prepare ourselves. It's hard. There's no question about it. Especially if somebody grew up with it. Somebody grows up with Torah, so, you got to keep that spark lit at all times. Somebody didn't grow up with Torah, so it's easier. Definitely easier to keep that spark lit. Because you can't take anything for granted. Because you look in the mirror, you know how you grew up. You know who you were. Now you're different. Right? But you're striving. You're striving to be the best you can be. Be all that you can. Right? Army song. That's what we have to do. That's what we're striving for. We're not striving for intellectuality. We're striving to be great. To be great spiritual people to reach our potential. So here, that's what my Rabbi says. These are the heads of the houses of our forefathers. Either you bring the genealogy through yourself or not. How do you do that? Torah knowledge. You learn, and you start the pedigree yourself. You are a wise rabbinic scholar. It's not an inheritance. Doesn't mean your kids will be. But you have to start with yourself. Because if you don't start with yourself, who are you going to start with? You say, oh, I got this great genealogy. Very nice. I'm going to rest on my laurels. I'll do things minimally. Well, guess what? If God thinks you have greater potential, you're in big trouble. Huge trouble. So the point here is, don't get sucked in, by what people say. Or by how great we think our family is, or whatever. The buck starts with me. Right? That's where it starts. And either it's going to be good or it's going to be bad. Where's the person holding? What were they doing? How did they grow? There are a million questions. But it starts with you. I want to remind people I give conversion classes. I give Noahide classes. You can take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or Beyond Noahides, or orthodoxconversion.com. You can take a look at my blog. Also, I have 2 question and answer sessions, usually twice a week. It's usually Tuesday, 10 o'clock in the morning, New York time, Thursday, 2 p.m. New York time, and people get their questions answered on whatever question they have about Judaism. I have a class on Path of the Just, not a live class. Anyone interested, I can send them a sample class of it. And every Tuesday, I have a class on Duties of the Heart, on Chovos Levavos, still in the introduction. That's a book of ethics and a book of Jewish philosophy. Meets every Tuesday at 9 o'clock New York time. Anyone has any questions or they want to contact me, they can contact me, Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.